to be honest with you, I think the role of the producer under the auspices or under the old traditional television of the BBC or Granada and ITV was very much that you were hired because of your relationships with writers, primarily your relationship with writers. You might have relationships with directors through the theatre, or you might have relationships with actors as well. But mainly it was to do with you were kind of custodian of writing Britain. And if you think of the great television drama of the 60s and the 70s, most of the key writers had stable relationships with producers. They had mates who they worked with on a regular basis. They were very much a team, and the producers were sort of paid and hired to bring that work to the broadcaster and to bring it alive and to make make drama. Sometimes it was very diverse. Sometimes it didn't work, and sometimes it was absolutely fantastic. And there was a fair amount of autonomy about who you chose to work with as a producer and what you actually worked on. I mean, it wasn't the case that everyone had their own budget, but I think there was a very strong sense that if you certainly worked at the BBC or you worked at Granada Television in the 60s or 70s, there was an expectation that you would produce a certain number of programmes, and that's what you did. And then the world changed quite radically in the 80s and 90s. This is all sort of probably ancient history for you, but the world became a much more commercial place. We had a Prime Minister called Margaret Thatcher, and we got rid of things like unions, and we got rid of an awful lot of things actually. But one of the things we got rid of was the traditional sense of a broadcaster as a curator of public interest. And someone had a bright idea to turn the BBC into a business. And in fact, that's exactly what they said. It's £1 billion a year business. And Kate and I were talking about this actually, because the whole world changed rather from this situation where producers had budgets, could make what they want, to a situation where they decided it would be better if you in fact introduced a management culture and a world of managers who would control those budgets. And ultimately, perhaps the producers couldn't make what they wanted unless the managers said it was okay. So we ended up in a world where some creative freedoms, quite a lot of creative freedoms, were kind of curbed, and the money people took over. So in some ways, it became much more commercialised and much more accountable. And I think that...
were you commissioning then, or were you producing?
I was still producing, primarily through the first half of the 90s. And then I got offered a job running Granada Studios, which at that time was still a very powerful part of ITV. It's now actually technically ITV, but at that time it was a part of ITV. I think that there was a sort of a flag of liberty still flying there, in the sense that there was still a belief that we could make decisions, we could be self-determined, we could make programmes if we believed in them, if we believed in writers. That was true because ITV was still sustaining what was a federal system. It had lots of different bits to ITV, and the different parts of the country had Yorkshire Television, Central Television, and I think within that kind of infrastructure, it was possible to still produce works of passion and so on. But that was quite a long time ago, and I think the world that we live in now is measured by some very forceful indices. Yes, one of which is first and foremost, do people watch what you make? And there's a hang-up about how many people watch what you make. And then there's a more complicated question, which is not just how many people watch what you make, but what sort of people watch what you make. And do the people who watch what you make have money? So it all goes back to money. And if they do have money, what kind of money do they have? Do they have disposable money? Do they have money they have to spend on food? Or do they have money they can spend on cars? It's a very brief anecdote I can tell just to express something about the advertising business and commerce in general, which is that I was once told when I went eventually to Channel 4, which was quite a commercial albeit an independent broadcaster, still quite a commercial broadcaster, because they relied on making money in order to produce, in order to commission their program. I was once told by someone who worked in advertising that I asked them what was the point of BMW. I assume you all know BMW as a car manufacturer. What was the point in BMW advertising a Series 7, which for those of you who don't watch Top Gear or know anything about cars, is the top of the range. Maybe it's not the top of the range anymore. I'm not that interested in cars, so maybe I've got that wrong. Anyway, what was the point of a Series 7 being advertised on ITV, which was a low rent, largely the majority of the audience are what they call a Ds or season Ds, which is not the top end. Well, obviously if they're showing Downton, it's different, but assume they're not. So it's Corrie. Corrie's on. Why advertise a BMW Series 7 when 95% of your audience can't afford or are unlikely to be able to afford a Series 7? And the answer to the question is the answer to the whole way that the advertising works in terms of brand awareness, which is that there is little point selling a BMW Series 7 to people who watch BBC Channel 4, or who can afford it, if the people who can't afford it don't know what it is. So there you have, in a nutshell, what you know, the definition of commerciality and the definition, to some extent, of the interests that drive an awful lot of our current investment in television. And it's worth being aware of that, because it does influence an awful lot of the forces that will decide what gets made and what doesn't get made. And that's a fact.